After a shipwreck, a man washes up on a mysterious island where a mad scientist is transforming animals into humans. But the fragile balance shatters fast when the experiments spiral out of control. A UN plane flying to Jakarta crashed, killing nearly all the passengers. The only fortunate survivors were Edward Douglas and 2 soldiers who had been escorting UN personnel. After the crash, the 3 men found themselves stranded in a lifeboat in the middle of the Java Sea, part of the vast Pacific Ocean. By the 6th or 7th day, tensions ran high, and the 2 soldiers started fighting over the last canteen of water. Watching from the side, Edward felt they were fighting like wild animals rather than men. Searching through their supplies, he found a flare gun and tried to stop the fight by threatening one of the soldiers. Instead, one soldier attacked Edward and began beating him, while the other took advantage and stabbed his opponent in the back with a knife. But the first soldier was stronger. He pulled the knife out of his shoulder and counterattacked. In the brutal struggle, they fell into the water, where a nearby shark, drawn by the scent of blood, attacked one of the men and dragged him under. The second soldier tried to escape and then turned on Edward, attempting to strangle him from behind. Realizing it was a fight for his survival and life, Edward fought back fiercely, smashing the attacker's head with a small shovel. Left alone, Edward was trapped in the middle of the ocean, without water or supplies, and eventually lost consciousness, feeling utterly isolated and hopeless. When he came to, Edward thought he saw a faint ship, but it seemed like a mirage. Later, he realized it was real. He had been rescued and was now aboard an old local fishing vessel. Edward was under the watchful care of Dr. Montgomery, who promised to look after the sole survivor, though he doubted Edward's true humanity. The lifeboat had been soaked in blood, yet Edward bore no wounds. Claiming to be a UN worker, Edward demanded a radio, but the old fishing boat was too outdated to have any modern communication equipment. Dr. Montgomery planned to leave the boat in 2 days to head to a paradise-like island, and Edward could continue his journey to the mainland from there. A couple of days later, they reached the doctor's drop-off point. Montgomery told Edward this was Dr. Moreau's island and warned him to leave the boat too. The island's owners were extremely hostile. Realizing he'd be safer with the doctor, Edward helped unload cages holding animals and went ashore with Montgomery. At the dock, Montgomery shared the island's strange history. It had belonged to various countries over time. The last owners were the Japanese, but economic issues forced them to sell it, and it was then acquired by the mysterious Dr. Moreau, who had a notorious reputation. When Edward arrives at the rabbit cages, he admits that he loves animals and used to breed rabbits. Montgomery isn't moved by the story. In fact, he coldly kills one of the rabbits by snapping its neck. He warns Edward not to tell Moreau, explaining that the island has strict laws forbidding murder, but that he's desperate for fresh meat. Edward finds this disturbing and strange, but he has no idea yet just how twisted this place really is. What he doesn't know is that a silent predator has been watching them from the nearby bushes all along. When they reach the island's main base, Edward notices advanced communication equipment and a radio tower, but none of it works because Montgomery hasn't kept up with maintenance. The doctor insists it's not a big deal and promises to fix it soon. Until then, Edward is advised not to leave the house because it's too dangerous outside. As he settles in, Edward explores and finds Dr. Moreau's Nobel Prize. Hearing music nearby, he spots a charming young woman dancing. When she sees him, Isa is startled but trusts Edward when he says he means no harm. Their peaceful conversation is interrupted by Montgomery, who teasingly calls Isa Kitty. Edward recalls Moreau's name. He'd actually been at the Nobel ceremony and assumed the doctor had disappeared or died, but that wasn't the case. Montgomery explains that Moreau was expelled from the U.S. due to his controversial animal experiments. Unwilling to give up his work, Moreau isolated himself on this island to continue. Montgomery, a brilliant neurosurgeon, met Moreau 10 years ago, was inspired by his ideas, left his medical career, and came here to be his assistant. After setting up a cramped bedroom on the 2nd floor, Montgomery tells Edward to make himself at home, but locks the front door behind him. The windows are barred with metal grates, making Edward feel trapped, but Montgomery insists it's for his own safety. Nights on the island are too dangerous. Ignoring this, Edward picks the lock with a hairpin and slips out to explore. He hears inhuman screams coming from a nearby barn and heads toward the noise. Hiding behind cages filled with animals and jars of organs, he witnesses a birth. Edward is speechless with horror. The creature giving birth looks like a twisted mix of woman and animal. When he rips off the doctor's mask, he sees another monster staring back and decides to run. At the barn's exit, Edward is confronted by more strange creatures that look like mutants. Confused and terrified, he flees into the bushes. There, Isa finds him and begs Edward to escape the island as soon as possible. Closer to dawn, the pair reach the shore but are pursued by humanoid apes and a dogman named Azazello. Realizing their path to the boat is blocked, Edward and Isa retreat back into the forest. There, they spot Lomai, the leopard man, with blood dripping from his mouth. Isa urges Edward to trust her and keep moving, but soon they find the torn-up body of a rabbit. Moments later, they encounter an aggressive ape named Asasimone. When Asasimone sees Edward's 5 fingers, recognizes that he walks upright, and understands the concept of laws, the ape calms down. Assassimone leads Edward to a hidden settlement of half-human, half-beast creatures, where he introduces him to the blind preacher known as the Herald of the Law. The Herald constantly repeats the island's laws like solemn commandments: no eating meat, no walking on all fours. Before Edward can speak with the Herald, an alarm sounds, signaling the arrival of Dr. Moreau. Edward is forced to join the other animals outside to greet the man whose face is covered in white makeup. Dr. Moreau carries himself like he is both the father of all creatures on the island and the Pope, blessing those around him. The doctor hates heat and usually hides from it, but today he has come to meet the island's new resident. Using a loudspeaker, Dr. Moreau orders Edward to hand over a pistol so he can shake off fear and feel power and control once again. At the same time, Moreau displays his dominance by activating a sinister device that causes unbearable pain to the mutant animals gathered there. Later, Edward returns to Moreau's house and meets his so-called sons. Little Maya, Mling, Azazello, and others frighten Edward with their grotesque appearance, but Moreau asks him not to judge them before knowing their true nature. Humans are too subjective. What really matters is not outward beauty but what lies within. Moreau admits he cannot explain his experiments and motivations all at once and suggests they continue the conversation over dinner. Yet he doesn't hide his main goal: to create the perfect being. Everyone present is just a step on the path to that goal. That evening, Dr. Moreau, his family, and Edward gather at the table. The scientist confesses that he has found something devilish in humans, a dangerous mix of genes. Through trial and error, he strives to perfect his experiments to create a new, ideal human. Moreau believes many humans are no better than animals, driven by fear, hunger, anger, envy, lust, and other immoral urges. His new creatures, however, are free from these feelings and can only spread kindness, allowing them to build a perfect society in the near future. Edward struggles to wrap his head around the bizarre rules of the island, and it seems not everyone around him takes them seriously. For instance, Dr. Montgomery openly kills a rabbit and orders it prepared for dinner, despite a strict island ban on eating meat. On top of that, Edward and Issa had just witnessed Lomai viciously attack and kill a rabbit. Disappointed in one of his sons, Dr. Moreau vows to hold a trial for the leopard man. Feeling trapped in this madness, Edward waits until midnight and tries to escape. At the dock, he attempts to steal a boat, but the engine won't start. Strange noises close in on him, and suddenly he's ambushed by mutated rat guards. Knowing his escape plan has failed, Edward reluctantly returns to the island. The next morning, Dr. Moreau calls all the human-animal hybrids together for a public meeting to address what happened. At one point, he accuses Lomai of killing the rabbit, which deeply upsets Lomai's best friend, the hyena swine mutant. Enraged, the leopard man tries to attack his creator and kill him, but the attempt fails. Just as Lomai leaps, Dr. Moreau presses a gleaming button that triggers excruciating pain in the leopard man's chest. Moreau recognizes that Lomai has broken the law but forgives him. After all, he's one of his sons. Azazello, however, believes the crime demands harsh justice punishment and shocks everyone by shooting Lomai dead, including Dr. Moreau himself. Realizing the situation is spiraling into chaos, Edward tries to use the old radio to contact the mainland but fails. Meanwhile, Dr. Moreau orders Lomai's body to be burned, a decision that pleases Azazello. The dogman catches the faint scent and reacts like a starving predator, barely able to control his aggression and smug satisfaction. Later, the hyena swine approaches the charred remains of his friend to say goodbye. On one of the bones, he finds a chip and realizes that Dr. Moreau uses it to control his subjects. Feeling around, he discovers a similar chip embedded in his own chest, and rips it out. Now, free from pain, he understands that without pain, there's no control, no law. The next day, Montgomery enforces a mandatory injection vaccine for all the human beasts to prevent regression, stopping them from slipping back into uncontrollable animals. Everyone complies except the hyena swine, who openly avoids the procedure. Brandishing the removed chip in his hand, he bolts into the forest. Knowing this means the hyena swine is no longer under control, Montgomery tries to kill him, firing a shot at his back, but misses. He then sends Azazello and other predators to hunt down and capture the escaped hyena swine. A dozen animals pursue and surround him, but the hyena's cunning and agility let him slip away and disappear into the dense jungle. That evening, Mling, the smartest of the half-human, half-animal hybrids, tries to help Edward establish contact with the mainland. Montgomery informs them all attempts are useless since he has removed a critical electronic component from the radio. The doctor's assistant tells Edward his hope is pointless. He won't be able to tell anyone what's going on, and if he does, they'll just call him crazy. On top of that, Montgomery notes that Edward has fallen for Issa but dismisses it as hopeless. She's a mutant, the product of a dangerous experiment, and will die if she leaves the island. Trying to save her, he says, is pointless. Overhearing the conversation, Issa seeks out her creator to confront him about her mutations. She's slipping into regression, slowly transforming into a cat. Her teeth have sharpened into animal-like fangs, and her ears are elongating, just like those of wild felines. Dr. Moreau reassures her, treating her as his finest creation yet. To him, Issa isn't just a mutant, she's something extraordinary, the key to finally crafting the perfect organism being. Meanwhile, the hyena swine rallies a small pack of wild beasts eager to follow him. They crave flesh and reject the pain and chains of their forced obedience. He helps them rip out the control chips that have kept them captive. Freed from their bonds, the group marches toward Dr. Moreau's house. Facing the raging mob, the doctor tries to keep his composure, avoiding provocation. He plays the piano and offers cookies, a feeble attempt to distract and calm them. But it's all a facade. When Maya hands back the control device, Dr. Moreau presses the button to try to subdue the hyena swine and his followers. The chips, however, fail, because the animals have already destroyed them. Realizing he's lost control, Dr. Moreau tries to flee, but the furious crowd overtakes him, brutally killing their creator and tearing him apart for sustenance. Edward watches in horror and fires a warning shot, scattering the beasts. Together with Issa and the others, he holds a somber funeral for the fallen scientist. Edward tries to comfort Issa, but her tears aren't just for the loss of her father. Her mutation is accelerating, and she desperately needs an antidote to halt her regression. Without Dr. Moreau, no one can create a cure, condemning her to become a wild, uncontrollable animal. Determined to save her, Edward rushes to the lab, only to find Montgomery deranged and painted in white face makeup, dressed in the late doctor's clothes. Montgomery confesses he deliberately destroyed all the antidote supplies, to punish the animals he believes don't deserve to become human. Meanwhile, the hyena swine and his pack douse a boat in the dock in gasoline, planning to burn any hope of escape. They want to trap everyone on the island, holding them captive. Azazello, who has stolen Montgomery's pistol, confronts the hyena swine, but the beast remains unfazed. With the remote control to the chips in hand, the hyena swine causes Azazello unbearable pain and convinces him to join their cause. The dogman, loyal but burdened by the pain of his chip, begs the hyena swine to remove it. The hyena swine rips the chip from the dogman's chest and commands him to take control of the island, crushing any resistance that stands in their way. Continuing to dig through the lab, Edward finds his own case with vials of blood and other biological fluids. Going through Dr. Moreau's notes, he realizes the mad scientist planned to use him as disposable material for his experiments. Edward's blood and genes were meant to be part of a new version of the antidote, but now the doctor is dead. Meanwhile, Montgomery has completely lost his grip on reality, fully taking on the persona of the late Dr. Moreau. He greets the animals like they're his own children, but the moment is shattered by Azazello. Showing up at a meeting armed, Azazello kills the late doctor's assistant. Then the hyena swine empties a whole clip into him. Edward tells Issa he can't help her or create the antidote. She realizes she's doomed to become a beast but decides to free the other animals locked in cages first. The hyena swine and Azazello set the lab on fire, but spot Edward and Issa escaping. While the hyena swine shoots up Dr. Moreau's office, plunging the island into chaos, Azazello goes hunting. Edward and Issa try to hide, but the dogman easily tracks them down. Surrounded, Azazello attacks Issa and executes her by hanging. Minutes later, the dogman delivers Edward to the hyena swine, who's declared himself the island's new leader. Realizing he no longer needs Azazello, the hyena kills him and uses a device to inflict pain on the other animals. Pointing a gun at Edward, he demands that Edward acknowledge him as a god. Edward plays along but taunts the hyena, saying the god isn't just him, it's anyone who's eaten Moreau's flesh. According to their rules, there can be only one god, and Edward challenges him to prove he's the true leader. The hyena falls for the provocation and opens fire on his own followers. In the brutal shootout, all the rebel beasts die, except the wounded hyena. Edward tries to set the house on fire, but the hyena shoots near him, keeping him pinned down. Bravemling, who loved Dr. Moreau and saw him as a father figure, starts the blaze and blows up the late doctor's home. Those who oppose the rebellion beat the hyena in Moreau's memory, while Edward holds him at gunpoint. Realizing no one shares his views and all the rebels are dead, the hyena walks into the burning building and dies. The next morning, Edward is given a homemade raft with a motor and sail so he can make it to the mainland. He's seen off by Assasimone and the Law's Herald, who have come to understand they don't need help or saving. Edward shouldn't return, they must remain who they are, not what the scientists tried to make them. The Law's Herald admits walking on two legs is tough, and it's better to go back to living like animals. Soon Edward returns to modern society, but watching people's behavior and cruelty, he realizes we're damn well a lot like beasts after all. Do we really have the right to alter nature simply because we believe we can make it better? Where's the line between groundbreaking science and dangerous arrogance? And once you start playing God, is there any turning back? Drop your thoughts in the comments down below, smash that like button, and be sure to subscribe for more. Catch you in the next video.